Tibetan paintings of the 11th through to the mid-15th century are from a period known as the late diffusion of the Buddhist faith. At this time, Tibet became one of the great Buddhist civilizations of Asia. Thousands of Indian Buddhist texts were translated into Tibetan, hundreds of Buddhist monuments were built to adorn Tibet's vast landscape, and countless young men and women entered the ranks of the burgeoning monastic orders. Throughout this, Tibetans commissioned and created paintings of exquisite splendor. They mastered ancient painting traditions from abroad and transformed them to express their own sacred visions. For example, this painting on cloth shows the Buddha of eternal life, Amitayus, sitting in a meditative posture. In his hands, he cradles his attribute, a vase that contains the elixir of immortality. He is invoked by devotees wishing to obtain a long life. On his left, he is flanked by the standing Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, and most likely on his right stands the Bodhisattva Manjushri. The Bodhisattvas seated above are differentiated by color, gestures, hairstyle, and crowns. However, these seated Bodhisattvas cannot be specifically identified. Amitayus is backed by an unusual throne, and the nimbus has a distinctive surround of lotus petals. The overall impression of this painting is that it is somewhat provincial, but many of the details of the principal figures reveal a sophisticated understanding of Indian models. Tibetan paintings were not considered to be complete until they were consecrated. Consecration ceremonies evoked the spirit of a deity or a historical person, and therefore installed this spirit in the painting's cloth. Thus empowered, such paintings enable the devotee to have access to a deity for purposes of worship and communication. Inscriptions were normally written on the back of the painting during or just after the consecration ceremony. These included mantras, usually placed behind the forehead, throat, and heart centers of all deities portrayed on the painting's obverse. The inscriptions could also record sacred creeds, and sometimes they stated the name of the consecrator. Other inscriptions simply state that the painting was consecrated many times. This painting is a portrait of a lama and is dated to approximately the last quarter of the 11th century, or perhaps the very beginning of the 12th century. Due to the inscription on the painting's reverse, we do not know the identity of the Lama depicted. He sits on a raised throne surmounted by an elaborate Torana and holds prayer beads before his chest. He wears Tibetan garments, which include a sleeveless vest of saffron color covered with small gold springs, a dark red robe draped asymmetrically across his chest, and a saffron-colored mantle patterned with stylized flowers at the center of foliate roundels. This painting, or thangka, is particularly important as it displays for the first time many compositional and stylistic motifs that became ubiquitous in the 12th and 14th century thangkas. Also, it is one of the two known early Tibetan portraits in which a lama is portrayed as a deified being. This is a painting of a Moghasiddhi, which is now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and is dated to the first half of the 13th century. A Moghasiddhi is one of the 5 transcendent Buddhas who preside over the heavens of the cardinal directions, his realm being the north. In this context, he is identifiable by his green color. A Moghasiddhi, who sits on a throne surrounded by bodhisattvas, holds his right hand in Abhaya Mudra, a gesture that extends protection to devotees. The style of this thangka is indebted to 12th century Eastern Indian painting traditions of the Pala period, as reflected in the dominant central figure and numerous descriptive details. This final portrait is of an abbot and originates from central Tibet and is dated to approximately 1350. It is an eclectic blend of Nepalese and Eastern Indian styles, as well as other features that point to a mid-14th century date. The abbot is shown in Bhumisparsa Mudra, or the earth-touching gesture. He sits on a lotus that rests on a throne base inhabited by lions and elephants. The form of the throne back is typical of Eastern Indian style, with the addition of the small kinnaras perched on the ends of the lower bar, but the chorana is Nepalese in format, with a squatting Garuda at the top, flanked by Nagarajas, snakes, and makaras with foliate tails. An unusual feature in this painting is the scrolling vegetation around the nimbus, which is normally absent in the Nepalese-style thankas, but appearing here in the form of small tufts of foliage interspersed with lotus buds. The whole ensemble is surrounded by a rainbow.